Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Sunday, March 23rd, 2025, and on Sundays we deal with the big questions, the purpose and meaning of life. It would seem that the purpose and meaning of life are determined in large measure by our individual journeys, our personal experiences, and deep reflections over the years. At the same time, our lives, of course, unfold inevitably in a sociocultural context that sets the stage upon which our individual dramas unfold. As such, we can and often do learn so much from others about ourselves and about our life's missions. Sometimes our mentors can assume their roles quite by accident. Or perhaps we may just find ourselves inspired by certain people who cross our paths. That can make all the difference. Here's briefly one such story. I met a woman some years ago and we became friends. Nothing unremarkable there. We meet people all the time through our work or at school or perhaps at a worship service or just in terms of our everyday interactions, social gatherings, events that we attend, and so forth. And yet, these chance encounters don't necessarily or even typically turn into long-term friendships. And yet, this was one such occasion. Even more remarkably, the friend in time became somebody who served as sort of a mentor for myself, somebody that I admired for a great many reasons. And there are many types of people about whom I've read over the years or known personally that I've admired. I might admire them. I've always admired people, for example, who've done great things in the world in terms of their intellectual or scientific accomplishments. Others I've admired for their artistic or aesthetic contributions. And then there are those whom I've admired mainly because of their moral compasses. And some might embody aspects of all of the above. But above all else, and this is just my personal framing and personal bias, I admire those who are committed to kindness and compassion. Those who are inspired to, and they're driven by this aspiration to make the world a better place. I used to joke with one of my lifelong friends, still one of my best friends, always will be, that his life mission seemed to be to own the world, whereas my life's mission was to save the world. And all these years, indeed decades later, he's succeeded fabulously, I think, and much more on his mission than I have in mine. He's been incredibly successful in business, and he's worth millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions of dollars. I don't know exactly. Don't need to know, but he's definitely in the top 1% of the wealthy. As for me, well, not only have I not saved the world, I've had to work extremely hard just to become a decent father to our 5 boys and hopefully a decent husband to my wife as well. So, I think I've ultimately been a loving father and a loving husband, but that's been enough of a struggle in and of itself, much less going about trying to save the world. Now, again, I'm not trying to be, self-deprecating here or denigrate myself, but I can take some credit for certainly having been a youth basketball coach, and I've coached other sports as well on and off for 35 years. And hopefully I've done a decent job in my nearly 4 decades of university teaching and my contributions in that regard. But as I say, I think I have to be pretty humble in terms of this notion of saving the world. And in those endeavors, and I think also with respect to the efforts with my family and with my wife, I've certainly always tried to improve, and I've tried to be a kind person. Haven't always succeeded in that regard, but that's, again, sort of been my aspiration. And so if I've done that successfully, if I've been a positive influence through my kindness and through my support of others, I think I owe at least a debt of gratitude to the unexpected female friend that I met all those years ago. And let's call her Amy, or Ami, if you will, kind of like the French word for female friend. And perhaps unknowingly, Amy, or Ami, ended up mentoring me on a regular basis in terms of kindness and compassion. So I'll give you just a few examples. One day I was impressed when Ami talked about how she ran into this Arab-speaking woman in the airport, just a random stranger from a Middle Eastern country who was traveling to Canada for the first time. She didn't speak English, and she didn't have Canadian money. So, well, Ami doesn't speak Arabic either, but she worked with the woman to try to figure out what was the nature of her problem, and she tried to help her basically as best she could. And in the end, Ami understood that the woman was more hungry than anything else, so she just bought her some food and gave her a little bit of money just to help her get to her next way station along the way. Just a random person, a total stranger, someone with whom she could barely communicate, one of thousands of people in the airport, and someone she'd never see again. But she decided the woman needed her help, and that's what she did while she was waiting to catch her flight. So on another occasion, Ami told me about she saw a Muslim woman wearing a hijab standing by a street traffic light, as we often see here in London, Ontario, people standing by traffic lights, and she was holding up a sign asking for money. She needed help to buy food for herself and her children. So Ami saw this and decided, I can go one better. She stopped, and again, the woman didn't speak English, as it turns out. She spoke Spanish. She had just arrived from Spain. And in her case, again, she didn't really have secure housing. She didn't have much money. She had a couple of kids, etc. So long story short, Ami stopped after a long day of her own at work, at her job, and she took the woman. She didn't just give her money. She went with the woman into the grocery store, which is, again, right by the traffic light as well. And she spent $40 or $50 just helping her pick out some foods and buying the essential groceries for herself and her children. And she then also directed the woman to some services that she could access and until she got better settled. And I remembered thinking, wow, who does that? I mean, a lot of us give money to strangers, or we'll see somebody, holding a cup out at that traffic light, and we'll drop a dollar or two or whatever, maybe $5 even, into the cup if we've got it and we're trying to help out. But taking the time out to engage with this person, this total stranger again, and to go into the grocery store and to help her get acclimated and pick out foods that would be healthy and that would be helpful, and obviously that she could share with her children. I thought, wow, that's remarkable. On another occasion, Ami received a desperate phone call from a common friend of ours. And the common friend, by the way, who didn't call me, they called Ami, but the friend's husband was at work. Sorry, let me get that straight. The friend, our common friend, was at work while her husband was at home with their children. They had several children. The problem was the husband had become quite ill, quite sick, unexpectedly, of course. And so, in turn, he really needed to get to the hospital. So what did Ami do? She went over right away, pulled herself together. It was her day off, but she went over, got the husband to a walk-in clinic, an urgent care clinic, so that he could be looked after. And then she, in turn, just spent the rest of the day looking after the children. So, she basically took care of the entire family for the day on her day off. Okay? On yet another occasion, another friend of ours had just given birth to her first child, and she'd returned from the hospital for her first night at home. So she and her husband and their newborn, 1 day, 2 days old, whatever it was. And unfortunately, the woman, the new mother, was struggling to feed the baby, in this case, right? And she was at her wit's end, and she called. She and her husband had no other family in the area. They're from a different country, etc. So what did Ami do? She went over, as you can guess. She went to their aid, and specifically, she helped the new mother with the feeding process. She gently taught her how best to help her get her newborn to latch on to her breast successfully. And then, of course, she stayed the entire night to allow them some comfort, some help whenever they needed it, some peace, and a chance to get some rest. And so I share these just few examples, but there are countless such examples. And what did I eventually learn? Well, Ami was not just engaging in proverbial random acts of kindness. She did these things on a routine basis. These were, if you will, habitual acts of kindness. Okay? And she did these things. She wasn't seeking anyone's approval. She wasn't seeking status. She wasn't seeking any personal benefits from her actions. She just did these things naturally, automatically, and with love in her heart. I learned that she epitomized my understanding, everything that I'd been taught, everything that I'd learned religiously, spiritually, in school about kindness and compassion. Again, perhaps drawn from her own faith and the concept of zakat in Islam to help those in need. But it wasn't so much the doing of these things and the ways in which she outwardly expressed kindness towards others. What I realized eventually and most profoundly was that that was her very being. She could not be any other type of person. So I realized too then that Ami was exactly the type of person that I wanted to be. Someone who possessed her own unique knowledge and skills and talents and abilities. But then she used her many gifts mainly in the service of humanity and in making the world a better place. And so with that realization, Ami did indeed eventually become my amour. And I was lucky enough that she was the one who agreed then to be my wife, my best friend, Ami, and my mentor. So for that, as an example, just that story about helping the mom with the newborn, of course that really happened. But she's actually done that on several occasions with different women. She doesn't need to think about what she'll do if she gets that call or someone's desperately in need. She's on autopilot because that's who she is. As soon as she senses someone in need, or if there's some way that she thinks she can help, she responds in her uniquely heliotropic fashion. What do I mean by that? Heliotropic means turning toward the light. And that's what my wife does. Just like a plant adjusts automatically throughout the day to always reposition themselves to align with the sun, to absorb the sunlight. Ami cannot help but to turn toward the light of the sun, especially if she's in a position where she can give nourishment and she can somehow help others. Well, not surprisingly, she works in a rheumatology clinic for her paying job, her paid position. And she helps those with chronic inflammatory conditions and who are often in constant pain. And on the side, she decided some years ago to study to become a healing touch practitioner. So what's healing touch? Well, I'll definitely do a vlog on this one day, but for now, understand that when we're talking about healing touch, we're talking about a type of complementary medicine therapy. It's sometimes known as biofield therapy. But in essence, healing touch practitioners use gentle touch and energy techniques to promote healing and well-being in a holistic fashion, mainly by balancing and realigning the body's energy fields. Now, this is quite remarkable because what I've seen over the years is that every time she gives someone or a client or just a friend or a random person who's hurting, every time she gives someone healing touch, she's almost like that empath on the old Star Wars episode. And I remember seeing this and being so impressed with the empath who would touch someone and then go through these convulsions and these transformations of her own skin and her own body to take the pain away and restore health and well-being. So again, I don't remember the name. Maybe it was called Empath, but this was actually from a Star Wars episode. And I thought, oh, that's incredible. But of course, that's sci-fi. That doesn't really happen. But that's in fact what Ami does when she gives healing touch. It's incredible. Now, again, she doesn't cure the person or, the way that it did in the Star Trek episode. So I'm not going to go overboard with that. But what I've seen on a consistent basis is a dramatic, immediate, or at least short-term improvement, and sometimes a long-term improvement in the conditions as well. So, and again, this is coming from somebody who's very much a Western medicine person and, ever the skeptic about, what are these energy fields and so forth. But it's obvious that there's something to it. And we are these energetic beings giving off heat and energy all the time. And so, sure enough, healing touch really does work. So I'm a total convert in that regard. And that's what Ami seems to be. And indeed, more generally, I'm convinced that there are people in this world who are genuine healers. And they have a special gift for healing others. And there really are then people who are committed to universal kindness and compassion. There are these people who can indeed inspire us all, much like Ami has done in my life, and I've borne witness to the many times she's unconditionally expressed her kindness and compassion towards others. And so some people are indeed the real deal. Okay? Now, sure, no one's perfect, obviously, including Ami. Like everyone else, she has her flaws, or at least her limitations. And Ami, too, needs love and compassion and support at times as well. But, and this is the key point, Ami reminds me every day that there's hope yet in this world, that I should always strive, and indeed I should redouble my efforts every single day, not simply to do good things, but to genuinely be the best version of myself. It's not just the doing, it's the being. And in turn, I hope then through my daily efforts and commitments, and maybe through the Dr. J Vlog series, among other efforts, perhaps I can strive to help you be the best version of yourself, whatever that might be. All right? So let's do this. All right, until next time, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts, and just be that person who's able and willing, perhaps, to give someone else who needs a hug today. God knows we all need a hug sometimes. All right, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.